After the resurrection, the disciples were hiding behind locked doors. These were the same men who had fled when Jesus was arrested, who had watched from a distance as he was crucified, who had scattered in fear the moment the danger became real. 11 frightened men in a locked room with nothing except the testimony of a few women who said they had seen him alive. And then something happened. Something that transformed these 11 frightened men into people who would travel across the known world, face imprisonment, torture, and execution, and refuse to the very last breath to say they had been lying. Whatever you believe about the resurrection, the story of what happened to the apostles after Easter morning is one of the most remarkable human stories in history, and almost nobody knows it. Subscribe before we go any further. Every week we go deeper into the Word together, and we will be here every step of the way. Before we tell these stories, we need to be honest about the sources. The New Testament only records the death of one apostle, James, the son of Zebedee, who was beheaded by King Herod Agrippa in Jerusalem around 44 AD. That account is in Acts chapter 12. For the rest of the apostles, we are relying on early church tradition, the writings of church fathers like Eusebius, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, and Origen, and occasional references in non-Christian sources. Some of these traditions are very early and well attested across multiple independent sources. Others are later and less certain. We will be clear about which is which as we go. Because this channel does not guess, and it does not present tradition as fact without saying so. Let us start with the one whose death the New Testament does record, James, the son of Zebedee, brother of John, one of the three who formed Jesus' inner circle alongside Peter. James was present at the Transfiguration. He was one of the three Jesus took with him into the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his arrest. And in the spring of 44 AD, Acts chapter 12 tells us simply that King Herod Agrippa laid violent hands upon some who belonged to the church. He had James, the brother of John, killed with the sword. That is all the Bible tells us. No speech, no dramatic last words, just the fact of his death recorded in a single sentence. He was the first of the 12 to be martyred, and Clement of Alexandria records a tradition that the soldier assigned to guard James was so moved by the courage and composure James showed on the way to his execution that he declared himself a Christian on the spot and was executed alongside him. Now Peter, the most prominent of the apostles, the one Jesus called the Rock, the one who had denied knowing Jesus 3 times on the night of the arrest and had wept bitterly. Peter's story after the resurrection is one of the most complete and well attested of any apostle. He preached on Pentecost. He led the early church in Jerusalem. He traveled to Samaria, to Caesarea, and eventually to Rome. And it is in Rome that his story ends. The evidence for Peter's martyrdom is strong by ancient standards. The letter of 1 Clement, written from Rome to the church at Corinth in the 90s AD, less than 30 years after Peter's death, says that Peter endured not 1 or 2, but numerous labors, and having at last suffered martyrdom, departed to the place of glory due to him. Origen, writing in the 3rd century, records that Peter was crucified head downwards at his own request, because he did not consider himself worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. The man who had denied Jesus 3 times in the courtyard of the high priest's house, who had wept in the dark over what he had done, died for him on a cross. Paul was not one of the original 12. He was their great persecutor. He held the cloaks of the men who stoned Stephen, the first Christian martyr. He traveled from city to city, hunting Christians down. And then, on the road to Damascus, he encountered the risen Jesus. And everything changed. He became the most prolific missionary in the history of the early church. He planted churches across the Roman Empire. He wrote the letters that form the backbone of the New Testament. And around 64 to 67 AD, under the persecution of Nero, he was beheaded in Rome. Paul knew what was coming. His second letter to Timothy, written near the end of his life, reads like a man who can see the end approaching. He writes, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. There is laid up for me a crown of righteousness." Not the words of a man who was surprised by what happened to him, the words of a man who had chosen it. John, the youngest of the 12, the one Jesus loved, as the Gospel describes him, the one Jesus entrusted with the care of his mother from the cross. John is the exception in this story. He is the only one of the 12 apostles who is generally believed to have died of old age, but not without suffering. Tertullian, writing around 200 AD, records a tradition that under Domitian, John was thrown into a vat of boiling oil in Rome, but survived miraculously. Whether that specific account is accurate, we cannot say with certainty. What is well attested across multiple sources is that he was eventually exiled to the island of Patmos, where he received the visions recorded in the book of Revelation. He later returned to Ephesus and died there, probably in the final years of the 1st century. He was the last living link to the ministry of Jesus, and the book he wrote on Patmos is still the last book in the Bible. Andrew was Peter's brother, a fisherman from Bethsaida. He was the one who brought Peter to Jesus in the first place, and according to well-established early church tradition, he became the apostle to the regions north and east of the Black Sea, including what is now Ukraine, Russia, and Greece. The tradition that holds the most weight among historians places his martyrdom at Patras in Greece, around 60 AD. He was crucified, but according to the tradition, he requested to be bound to an X-shaped cross rather than the traditional T-shaped cross, because he did not consider himself worthy to die in the same way as Jesus. That X-shaped cross is still known as St. Andrew's Cross, and it forms the basis of the Scottish national flag. Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland, Russia, and Greece. Thomas, the one history has labeled Doubting Thomas, who demanded to see the wounds before he would believe the resurrection, who, when he did believe, said, "My Lord and my God," in one of the most direct declarations of Jesus' divinity in the entire New Testament. Thomas, according to the strongest tradition, traveled further east than any other apostle. He preached in Parthia, in what is now Iran and Iraq, and eventually reached India. The Mar Thoma Church in Kerala, India, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, traces its direct founding to Thomas. They have maintained this tradition continuously for nearly 2,000 years. The tradition of his death, widely accepted within the Mar Thoma community and referenced by early church sources, is that he was killed by a spear near Chennai in southern India around 72 AD. A basilica marks the site of his tomb. Here is the remarkable thing about Thomas, the man who refused to believe without evidence, who demanded to touch the wounds, carried the message of the resurrection to the furthest point any apostle reached, and died for it. Matthew, the tax collector, the man whose calling by Jesus was itself scandalous to the religious establishment. Tax collectors were considered collaborators with the Roman occupation and were despised by the Jewish community. Matthew's gospel is addressed primarily to a Jewish audience and is the most Jewish in its presentation of Jesus. After the resurrection, tradition records that Matthew preached first among Jewish communities and then traveled to Persia and Ethiopia as a missionary. The tradition of his death varies between sources, with some records suggesting he died a natural death and others describing martyrdom by sword. The evidence for Matthew is less certain than for Peter, Paul, or James, and we hold it accordingly. Philip, one of the earliest disciples Jesus called, a man from Bethsaida, the same town as Peter and Andrew. It was Philip who Jesus asked how they were going to feed 5,000 people, knowing what he was going to do. The tradition holds that Philip became a missionary in what is now Turkey and Greece, and was martyred at Hierapolis in Phrygia, in modern Turkey, around 80 AD. Bartholomew, also known in the Gospel of John as Nathanael, who said to Philip when told about Jesus, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" and then met Jesus and declared him the Son of God. Tradition sends him to India, Armenia, and Arabia. The Armenian Apostolic Church considers him one of its founders. The tradition of his death, widely accepted in the Armenian Church, is that he was flayed alive and then beheaded in Armenia. His feast day is observed by multiple Christian traditions to this day. Simon the Zealot, one of the most intriguing of the 12 simply by his name. The Zealots were a radical Jewish political movement that advocated violent resistance to Roman occupation. Simon had been one of them before he followed Jesus. The fact that among Jesus's 12 disciples were both a former Roman tax collector, Matthew, who collaborated with the occupation, and a former zealot, Simon, who had dedicated himself to opposing it, is one of the most overlooked details in the Gospel accounts. Jesus brought together people who, in any other context, would have had nothing to say to each other except in anger. The tradition for Simon is less certain than for many of the others. He is often mentioned alongside Thaddeus, also known as Jude, son of James, as a missionary pair. The tradition sends them to Persia, and the tradition of both their deaths is that they were martyred there. James, son of Alphaeus, known as James the Less or James the Younger, is recorded by Josephus as having been stoned to death in Jerusalem in the 60s AD. This is one of the better attested accounts among the less prominent apostles, given the Josephus reference. Matthias, who replaced Judas Iscariot, is recorded in various traditions as having been martyred by stoning or beheading, with Syria as his primary missionary territory. Taken together, across these 12 men who witnessed the risen Jesus, 10 died violently as martyrs for what they proclaimed. 1, John, survived all attempts on his life and died in old age after a lifetime of suffering. And 1, Judas Iscariot, died by his own hand before any of this unfolded. 10 out of 11, who saw something and refused to say they had not seen it. Now, here is the argument that these stories make, and we need to sit with it carefully, because it is one of the most compelling in the entire case for the resurrection. People die for beliefs all the time. That is not unusual. People die for religious convictions they hold sincerely. People die for political ideologies. People die for things they genuinely believe, even when those things are false. Sincerity does not prove truth. But there is a distinction that matters here. People die for what they believe to be true. People do not, in general, die for what they know to be false. The apostles were not dying for a belief passed down to them by someone else. They were not dying for a religious tradition they had inherited. They were dying for something they claimed to have personally witnessed. They said they had seen the risen Jesus with their own eyes. They said they had touched him. They said they had eaten with him. They said they had watched him ascend. If they had made that up, they knew it, every one of them. They would have known that they were dying for a deliberate lie. And not one of them, under any recorded circumstances, in the face of any recorded threat, recanted. Not under arrest, not under torture, not facing execution. Not one of the 10 who died as martyrs said, "Actually, we made it up. Let me go home." You have 3 options for explaining that. They were all delusional. They were all lying and were willing to die for the lie, or they were telling the truth. Historians and philosophers have wrestled with that question for 2,000 years. We leave it where it belongs, with you, with the evidence, with the question of what kind of thing produces this kind of response. There is one more story that belongs in this episode. Not one of the 12, but perhaps the most dramatic transformation in the entire New Testament. Paul was not in the upper room. He was not at the Last Supper. He did not see the crucifixion. He was not among the women at the tomb on Easter morning. At the time of the resurrection, Saul of Tarsus was one of the most zealous and effective persecutors of the early Christian movement that existed. He had the authority, the education, the religious credentials, and the personal commitment to destroy this new sect before it spread further. And then something happened on the road to Damascus. He describes it in his own words in Galatians, in Corinthians, in Acts. A light, a voice, a question. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And then blindness. And then 3 days of fasting. And then a complete reversal of everything he had been. Paul's conversion is significant for one specific reason in the context of this episode. He was not predisposed to believe. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain from becoming a Christian. He had status, influence, a career built on the persecution of the very movement he now joined. And he lists in his letters what he gave up and what he received in exchange. He received beatings, imprisonments, stonings, shipwrecks, sleeplessness, hunger, cold, and eventually death by beheading under Nero. He also received, he writes, things that cannot be taken, a joy that passes understanding, a peace that surpasses comprehension, the knowledge of Christ Jesus his Lord, for which he counted everything else as rubbish. This was not a man performing. This was not a man calculating an advantage. This was a man who had encountered something so real that it rearranged everything. So, what does the story of the apostles mean for us today? First, these were ordinary people. A fisherman, a tax collector, a political revolutionary, a man who doubted, a man who denied, a man who betrayed. These are not figures of effortless faith and perfect character. They are people who got things wrong, who failed, who panicked, who ran. And then something happened. And they became people who crossed continents and faced death rather than let go of what they had seen. Second, the geographical reach of where these men went is extraordinary. Within one generation of the resurrection, the message had reached from Jerusalem to Rome to Ethiopia to India. Without printing, without the internet, without mass communication of any kind, carried by men on foot and by sea, one conversation at a time, at personal cost that most of us will never be asked to imagine. Third, and this is the one that stays with us, every one of these men had a moment, somewhere on a road or in a prison cell or standing in front of a hostile crowd, where they could have stopped. Where they could have said, "All right, I was mistaken. I will go home. I will be quiet. I will live." And not one of them did. Not one of the 10 who died as martyrs. We do not know exactly what they saw on that first Easter morning, or on the road to Emmaus, or on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. We were not there. But we know what they did with it. We know where they went. We know what they faced. And we know that the message they carried at the cost of their lives is still being spoken 2,000 years later in every language on earth, including the one you are hearing it in right now. Before you go, drop a comment below. Tell us, where in your life are you hoping Christ will guide you? Whatever it is, write it down. This community will see it and stand with you. If this breakdown moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. Every week we go deeper into the Word together. Subscribe, and let's walk this path together.